Good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually in my classroom today doing some packing up, but I'm going to read chapter 25, The Great Glass Elevator, to you. When we finished chapter 24 yesterday, Veruca Salt was in the nut room and she ended up running in there because she wanted a squirrel, and she went down the hole where they send the bad nuts. And then her mom and dad went in after her as well. So that's where we left off in chapter 24. 25 is called The Great Glass Elevator. "I've never seen anything like it," cried Mr. Wonka. "The children are disappearing like rabbits. But you mustn't worry about it. They'll all come out in the wash." Mr. Wonka looked at the little group that stood beside him in the corridor. There were only two children left now, Mike Teavee and Charlie Bucket. And there were three grown-ups, Mr. and Mrs. Teavee and Grandpa Joe. "Shall we move on?" Mr. Wonka asked. "Oh, yes," cried Charlie and Grandpa Joe, both together. "My feet are getting tired," said Mike Teavee. I want to watch television." "If you're tired, then we'd better take the elevator," said Mr. Wonka. "It's over here. Come on. In we go." He skipped across the passage to a pair of double doors. The doors slid open. The two children and the grown-ups went in. "Now then," cried Mr. Wonka, "which button shall we press first? Take your pick." Charlie Bucket stared around him in astonishment. This was the craziest elevator he had ever seen. There were buttons everywhere. The walls and even the ceiling were all covered with rows and rows and rows of small black push buttons. There must have been 1,000 of them on each wall, and another 1,000 on the ceiling. And now Charlie noticed that every single button had a tiny printed label beside it telling you which room you would be taken to if you pressed it. "This isn't just an ordinary up and down elevator," announced Mr. Wonka proudly. "This elevator can go sideways and long ways and slantways and any other way you can think of. It can visit any single room in the whole factory, no matter where it is. You simply press the button and zing, you're off." "Fantastic," murmured Grandpa Joe. His eyes were shining with excitement as he stared at the rows and rows of buttons. "The whole elevator is made of thick, clear glass," Mr. Wonka declared. "Walls, doors, ceilings, floor, everything. It's made of glass so that you can see out." Here they are in the elevator. There's a picture. Got all the buttons around there. "But there's nothing to see," said Mike Teavee. "Choose a button," said Mr. Wonka. "The two children may press one button each. So take your pick. Hurry up. In every room, something delicious and wonderful is being made." Quickly, Charlie started reading some of the labels along the side buttons. "The Rock Candy Mine, 10,000 feet deep in," said one. "Corknut Ice Skating Rinks. Coke, Cockernut Ice Skating Rinks," it said on the other. "Then Strawberry Juice Water Pistols. Toffee apple trees for planting out in your garden, all sizes. Exploding candy for your enemies. Luminous lollies for eating in bed at night. Mint jujubes for the boy next door. They'll give him green teeth for a month. Cavity filling caramels, no more dentist. Stick jaw for talkative parents. Wriggly sweets that wriggle delightfully in your tummy after swallowing. Invisible chocolate bars for eating in class. Candy coated pencils for sucking. Fizzy lemonade. Swimming pools. Magic hand fudge. When you hold it in your hand, you taste it in your mouth. Rainbow drops. Suck them and you can spit it in six different colors." Come on, cried Mr. Wonka. "We can't wait all day," because he was reading all of those labels. "Isn't there a television room in all this lot?" asked Mike Teavee. "Certainly there's a television room," Mr. Wonka said. "The button over there." He pointed with his finger. Everybody looked. "Television chocolate," it said on the tiny label beside the button. "Whoopee!" shouted Mike Teavee. "That's for me." He stuck out his thumb and pressed the button. Instantly there was a tremendous whizzing noise. The doors clanged shut and the elevator leaped away as though it had been stung by a wasp. But it leapt sideways. and all the passengers, except Mr. Wonka, who was holding on to a strap from the ceiling, were flung off their feet and onto the floor. Get up, cried Mr. Wonka, roaring with laughter. But just as they were staggering to their feet, the elevator changed direction and swerved violently around the corner, and over they went once more. Help! Shouted Mrs. TV. Take my hand, madam, said Mr. Wonka. There you are. Now grab this strap. Everybody grab a strap. The journey's not over yet. Old Grandpa Joe staggered to his feet and caught hold of a strap. Little Charlie, who couldn't possibly reach as high as that, put his arms around Grandpa Joe's legs and hung on tight. The elevator rushed on at the speed of a rocket. Now it was beginning to climb. It was shooting up and up and up on a steep, slanty course, as if it were climbing a very steep hill. Then suddenly, as though it had come to the top of the hill and gone over, it dropped like a stone, and Charlie felt his tummy coming right up in his throat. Probably kind of feels like being on a roller coaster, up, 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 and then you go down. Grandpa Joe shouted, "Yippee! Here we go!" And Mrs. TV cried out, "The rope has broken. We're going to crash." And Mr. Wonka said, "Calm yourself, my dear lady," and patted her comfortably on the arm. And then Grandpa Joe looked down at Charlie, who was clinging to his legs, and he said, "You all right, Charlie?" Charlie shouted, "I love it. It's like being on a roller coaster," just like I said. Charlie shouted, and through the glass walls of the elevator, as it rushed along, they caught sudden glimpses of strange and wonderful things going on in some of the other rooms. An enormous spout with brown sticky stuff oozing out of it onto the floor. A great craggy mountain made entirely of fudge with Oompa Loompas, all roped together for safety, hacking huge hunks of fudge out of its sides. A machine with white powder spraying out of it like a snowstorm. A lake of hot caramel with steam coming off it. A village of Oompa Loompas with tiny houses and streets and hundreds of Oompa Loompa children, no more than 4 inches high, playing in the streets. And now the elevator began flattening out again, but it seemed to be going faster than ever, and Charlie could hear the scream of the winds outside of it as it hustled forward. And it twisted, and it turned, and it went up, and it went down, and "I'm going to be sick," yelled Mrs. TV, turning green in the face. "Please don't be sick," said Mr. Wonka. "Try and stop me," said Mrs. TV. "Then you'd better take this," said Mr. Wonka, and he swept his magnificent black top hat off his head and held it out upside down in front of Mrs. TV's mouth. Make this awful thing stop," ordered Mr. TV. "Can't do that," said Mr. Wonka. "It won't stop till we get there. I only hope." Hold on, guys, my light's off. Sorry. "Can't do that," said Mr. Wonka. "It won't stop till we get there. I only hope no one's using the other elevator at this moment." "What other elevator?" screamed Mrs. TV. "The one that goes the opposite way on the same track as this one," said Mr. Wonka. "Holy mackerel," cried Mr. TV. "You mean we might have a collision?" "I've always been lucky so far," said Mr. Wonka. "Now I'm going to be sick." "Sick," yelled Mrs. TV. "No, no," said Mr. Wonka. "Not now. We're nearly there. Don't spoil my hat." The next moment there was a screaming of brakes, and the elevator began to slow down. Then it stopped altogether. "Some ride," said Mr. TV, wiping his great sweaty face with a handkerchief. "Never again," gasped Mrs. TV. And then the doors of the elevator slid open, and Mr. Wonka said, "Just a minute now. Listen to me. I want everybody to be very careful in this room. This is dangerous stuff around here, and you must not tamper with it." All right, and that is the end of chapter 25. We will pick up with chapter 26 tomorrow. Bye, guys.